Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are attempting the ultimate shortcut to some really ancient spiritual wisdom.
We are. The source material you shared focuses entirely on the Satanapada, or SNP, which is a pretty profound and, I think, unusual collection of Buddhist poetry from the Pali Canon.
Right, and it's called one of the most vibrant and rewarding of the minor works.
It is. So for this deep dive, we're really trying to extract its unique character. The scholarly commentary points out, that these are highly concentrated, vivid, very personal poems.
So this isn't something you just skim.
No, absolutely not. The mission here is to savor it, to let it, as they say, get into your bones.
I like that framing. It really demands a different kind of attention. But before we get into the poetry, we have to talk about time. I mean, how ancient are we really talking here? The Satanapada has this reputation for being incredibly old, but the history feels complicated.
It is complicated, and we should probably establish right away that the SNP is absolutely composite work. We have to kind of push back against this idea that the collection as a whole is uniquely early.
Okay, so let's unpack that. We're saying there are truly old parts mixed in with, well, later material. So what are the genuinely old kernels?
The three oldest sections are generally thought to be the Ahekabagga, the Parayanabagga, and the Kagavisa Sutta. And we have good reason to think so.
Because of King Ashoka.
Yeah, exactly. His Calcutta Baira edict from around the 3rd century BCE, it lists specific texts he thought were essential reading for monks and nuns. And one of them, the Munigatha, is widely identified with a poem in the SNP.
So that's our historical anchor. We have hard evidence that parts of this were revered and used just, a little over a century after the Buddha's death? That's powerful.
It's a very powerful anchor. It confirms these teachings were central early on. But you're right, the full text we have now includes later additions. Things like the introductions to some of the poems. It was curated over time.
The sources also mention a kind of geographical signature, an emphasis on the South. Why does that matter? Does that change how we read the text?
It connects the transmission to a specific region. The Parayanavagga, which we'll get to, it details a journey along the southern road, stopping in places like Ujjaini, the capital of Avanti.
And Avanti is important because...
Well, Avanti, in western India, is strongly associated with the early transmission of the Ahekavagga. So what this suggests is that the Pali Canon we have today might actually be the version that was, organized and passed down by the monks from that specific regional tradition.
And there's linguistic evidence for that, too.
There is. Pali, the language of the canon, has some strong similarities to Western dialects, like the ones you find in the ancient Gurnar inscriptions. It really roots the whole collection in a specific, influential Southern culture.
That sets the scene perfectly. So this isn't just a random assortment of poems. Let's get to the substance, starting with one of the most visceral metaphors in the whole collection, the serpent.
Yes, we start with the Uraga Sutta, the discourse on the serpent. The metaphor is, on the surface, very simple. The mendicant is like a snake that sheds its old skin, but you have to feel the impact of that in its original context.
This wasn't some gentle springtime renewal image.
No, not at all. In ancient India, a snake was terrifying, a deadly menace. So to compare the mendicant to a snake was to associate them with this dangerous, mysterious power. A creature of transformation, yes, but one tied to immediate natural death.
So the power is in the shedding, the constant discarding of the old. But the text adds a philosophical twist here, urging the mendicant to shed Orapara, the near shore and the far.
Precisely. And this is the radical insight. In most Buddhist texts, the far shore is Nibbana, right? The ultimate goal. The near shore is this world of suffering.
So if the far shore is freedom, why would you shed the goal itself? That sounds almost like nihilism.
And that's the productive friction this text creates. In this specific context, the meaning is different. It's about transcending duality itself. There's another text that clarifies this with a simile of a tree trunk floating downstream. It has to avoid the near shore, which is the 6 internal senses, so self-attachment, and has to avoid the far shore, the 6 external sense objects, attachment to the world. The point is to stop clinging to any definition of existence.
And this is where it gets really interesting because that snake metaphor was already out there. It was a big deal in the Upanishads.
A huge deal. You look at the Bhattacharya Upanyan, and the snake shedding its skin is a metaphor for revealing the true, abiding self, the Atman. The essence is still there. You just shed the outer layer.
So the Buddha takes a shared symbol and completely flips its meaning.
He does. He's implicitly rejecting that idea of a permanent substance. The S&P says the whole point is not what the shedding reveals, but the act of shedding itself. It's about finding no substance in existence. There's no essential self waiting inside. It's freedom through non-clinging.
That sets us up for a life of detachment. So let's move to one of the most famous sections, the Atthakavagga. This chapter feels, I don't know, almost brutally unsentimental. And it gives a different origin story for the Buddha's quest.
It really does. The Atatsuddha suggests the catalyst wasn't just a personal crisis, seeing old age and sickness. It was a reaction to the public horror of war, probably the conflict between the Scythians and the Kosalans.
And the imagery is just shocking. Humanity floundering like a fish in a little puddle.
It's stark. And that external chaos forces an internal realization. The real source of violence is the dart. This dart is the metaphor for suffering, and its causes, greed, hate, delusion, conceit.
So the problem is internalized. If the dart is buried inside you, then the cure is possible, but the quest has to be inward.
Exactly. And the real signature of the Atthakavagga is its relentless focus on avoiding dogma or views. For a renunciant, getting attached to a philosophical view is a huge trap. The enlightened sage, it says, neither takes up nor sets down.
That's a beautiful paradox. If you've already let go of everything, you don't need to try to let go of anything.
Right. It implies this state of profound non-duality. And this is reinforced by this unrelenting insistence on self-reliance. It says it in 6 different places. It is not possible for one person to purify another. The quest is yours alone.
That self-reliance connects to how you acquire knowledge, right? The idiom of seen, heard, thought, and cognized.
Yes, the classic categories. But what's fascinating is that in the Atthakavagga, that last term cognized, which means deep meditative insight, direct vision, is often missing.
Huh. So what does that imply? Who are these poems for if they leave out the direct insight part?
It suggests they might have been aimed at people who were arriving at their beliefs through faith or reason, what they had seen, heard, or thought, rather than deep meditation. It's a pragmatic text for debaters, telling them to drop the concepts and get back to self-reliance.
Okay, so from that internal focus, let's look at the external life. The S&P famously balances this call for extreme solitude with, well, universal love. We see that tough, independent image in the Kaigavisutta Sutta, the rhinoceros horn discourse.
This is the famous one. Live like a lion, wander alone like a solitary rhinoceros horn. It's a very rugged, masculine ideal. But scholars have debated what its function was.
It wasn't just for a special class of hermits.
Probably not. The persuasive argument is that it was written as a teaching for renewal. The story goes that the Buddha came up with these verses after seeing a really dispiriting, bitter dispute among settled monks at Kosambi.
So the call for solitude was a kind of ought, a prescription.
Exactly. It was a sharp instruction for monks who'd become dull and institutionalized, a reminder of what they should be doing.
And the perfect counterpoint is the Metta Sutta, the discourse on love. The sources prefer translating metta as just love rather than loving kindness. Why that choice?
It's about directness. Pali already distinguishes between sensual love, kama, and this spiritual love, metta. Using the ordinary word love makes it more immediate, more relatable, instead of using a kind of emotionally cool, antiseptic neologism.
And the history of this poem is a perfect example of how the S&P integrated wisdom from the surrounding culture.
Yes. The original version probably ended with rebirth in the Brahma realm, which is a goal in other traditions too. You find these practices in the Yoga Sutra and later Upanishads.
So how did it become distinctly Buddhist?
Through a later addition. A final verse, verse 10, was added that reframed the whole thing. It connected the practice of love to achieving stream entry, the realization of Nibbana. It basically says, use this wonderful practice, but use it as a foundation for insight, not just a ticket to a temporary heaven.
That focus on insight also extended to challenging the social order, especially the Brahmin caste. The Vasala Sutta is so direct.
It's incredibly blunt. You're not a lowlife by birth, nor by birth are you a Brahmin. You're a lowlife by your deeds. By deeds, you're a Brahmin. I mean, that just rejects the entire premise of the caste system.
And the Brahmin Tadhamka Sutta seems to offer this revisionist history of what a true Brahmin was, which conveniently looks a lot like a Buddhist mendicant.
It's a polemical masterwork, but it's based on historical fact. It depicts ancient Brahmins as renunciants devoted to austerity, which actually lines up with some of their own law books. It's drawing on genuine traditions.
But it's the selection of details that really lands the punch, especially around animal sacrifice.
That's the core point of friction. The S&P insists that the ancient pure Brahmins practiced harmless rites and slew no cows, calling them our best friends, the fonts of medicine.
In a culture where Vedic religion centered on sacrifice, that must have been a bombshell.
A huge one. The Rig Veda has Indra devouring oxen. Some Upanishads recommend beef to have a strong sun. By claiming the original Brahmins were harmless, the SNP is basically saying, our way, the mendicant way, is closer to the true, ideal past of your own tradition than your current corrupt practices are.
Wow. Okay, let's follow this path to its conclusion with the final chapter, the Paryanavaga, the way to the far shore.
This is a really dramatic end to the collection. It's the story of 16 accomplished Brahmin students who will travel from Savatthi all the way to the south to find the Buddha. Their teacher, Baivari, has been cursed, and he's terrified his head will explode in 7 pieces.
And the Buddha is the only one who understands that head splitting is really about the breaking of ignorance.
Exactly. So it sets up this high-stakes spiritual quest. And one of the most fascinating answers is the advice he gives to a student named Upasiva, who is practicing a very advanced meditation, the dimension of nothingness.
And his old teacher said this would lead to 60,000 eons of rebirth.
Yes, which sounds great.
It sounds incredible. So why does the Buddha tell him to go beyond that? What's the trap?
The trap is subtle attachment. The dimension of nothingness is an advanced state, way beyond the senses. But because it's conditioned, it has a beginning and an end, even if it lasts eons, it's still temporary. If Upasiva clings to that state as the final goal, it just leads to rebirth in that dimension. The Buddha tells him to use it, but only as a foundation for nibbana, which is unconditional.
It's a reminder that even the highest spiritual states have to be viewed with detachment. So the final questions really wrap everything up.
They do. Ajita asks what shrouds the world, the Buddha says, ignorance. And the final insight here is about contemplating not self, subtly introducing the idea of emptiness. And then Upasiva asks again, what happens to the consciousness of someone who achieves this freedom?
And the final answer is one of the most memorable images in the whole text.
It is. The Buddha says that just as a flame tossed by the wind comes to an end and can't be reckoned or named, so too is the sage freed. You can't define or calculate that state. The text then closes with Pulya, an old Vedic reciter, who says he will keep on reciting the new teaching. He's adopting the Brahmanical method of oral transmission to preserve the Dhamma.
And that brings us full circle. We've explored a collection that demands slow, reflective savoring, and it offers freedom from time, from attachment, and from all the endless disputes of the era.
Yeah, the SMB begins with the serpent, telling you to shed your old skin, and it ends with the flame, asking you to let consciousness itself cease. It's a massive challenge.
So when you think about the whole arc of the text, from shedding the sensory near shore of daily life to transcending the far shore of even the most subtle spiritual states like Upasiva's meditation, we're left with a really powerful question. What's the more challenging task for you to confront in your own life? Abandoning the obvious pull of sensual attachment, or transcending that subtle, often unseen attachment to your own spiritual progress and your fixed views?
Something worth mulling over. Slowly.
Indeed. Thank you for guiding us through this incredibly rich material.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We'll be back soon with more insights from the sources you're reading right now.